Conspiracy. He's your daily leftist detox counselor, your fearless host, Brock Lawley.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Brock Lawley program. My name is Brock Lawley. I am your fearless host. My plan was to do a news headlines segment here. I know they're informative. I know you like them. I know the audience likes them. However, there are two stories. And, of course, these stories have been looming. It's not exactly... you'll have heard of both of these. But recently, in the sort of evolution of these stories, if you will, the troubling nature of this is so bad that I figured, the several thousand listeners that I have, I'm just going to throw that pebble into the ocean of misinformation, hope that it creates a few ripples. The interesting thing about alt media, the interesting thing about alternative messaging in a sea of misinformation and statist, elitist, in this country, at least in the United States of America, the Democrat media complex, the opposition party complex media, there's a lot of evidence that they fear us. And the truth is that comparatively, still, obviously it is true that the audiences are disproportional. I mean, you have an evening 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock primetime show. You're going to probably pull, if you're on Fox, you're going to probably pull several million. If you're on MSNBC, you're going to pull several 100,000. And those are just facts. I used to work in television. I know how to read these demographics. But, that's what people don't realize is that's a disproportionate amount of people that are not either familiar with new media or, aren't comfortable with it. But there's a lot of evidence, a ton of evidence, that new media is a threat. The entire fake news facade, which has to be one of the greatest balls of irony to ever roll down the bowling alley in the last couple years, that the literal alphabet soup is accusing alternative media of being fake news. And now, of course, the never-ending Donald Trump and Russia saga, which, of course, to this day, as I'm speaking to you, still zero substantiation. Zero. That's why you'll hear words like maybe, might have, heard this from this guy. Our sources are telling us, we've heard from a person. All that stuff is just roads filled with nails, highways of information purposely filled with nails by an alphabet soup and a media complex that is actually in existence and actually has constitutional protection to inform a free people. They do just the opposite. They calcify their chosen avenue of power, which is elitism, which is establishment power. It's just abundantly clear. And the reason I lay this before you, this idea that the media is biased is old news, right? Everybody knows that. But the reason I lay this before you is there is, very serious efforts, and they're real. And that's why I'm drawing this to your attention. Very, very serious efforts to just snuff out the alternative ways of delivering information. And one of the most revolutionary things in my lifetime has clearly been YouTube. Now, I have major problems with YouTube, and we're going to get into some of them here. But I myself, with very little effort, and to my great dismay, and this is all my own fault, but, I was not premeditated in how I approached it. As these, wild west mediums present themselves, we all just fumble through them. Well, my forte in the world of YouTube was fascinating even to me, because I was getting involved in this far before everybody had carved out their little niche and monetized everything, and it was a little side job for a bunch of millennials or a career for a few successful channels. It was long before that. I just had something to say, which, I still would argue that in YouTube's heyday, before it was thoroughly bought, controlled, and corporatized, which I'm going to get into here, it was just a voice for the voiceless. What an amazing tool that is. So I just threw my hat in the ring, and of course, like all things in 2017, if you speak anything truthful, wise, laced with any kind of common sense, you will certainly feel the wrath of the imbecilic. And in my case, the world was the godless, the atheist, the secular extreme. And so voila, before I know it, thousands of subscriptions. And of course, no campaigns, no effort to do any of that. Which is what I'm alluding to when I say I didn't give it much thought. I wasn't strategic about it. And that's all rear view mirror thinking. We can all do that with everything. But even then, I realized that even at that point, and it was very free by comparison, but even at that point, YouTube would shut down things that they didn't like or didn't want. Now, at that point in time, and I'm no expert on this, but at that point in time, I think it was more a fault in the algorithm, a fault in the system. It used to be that if you didn't like somebody's message, you could just flag it. They offered a flag option, and it's known as a false flag. You just flag it. You could also, develop campaigns of people, organized groups of people that would just campaign, and a couple hundred people would watch up at your shore within an hour and false flag your video. And you could tell that, of course, because you can look and you can see the analytics and you can see what happened. You get like 100 false flags in 90 minutes. You realize that was organized. Now, that all went down, and like I said before, that was the Wild West. That just was. I mean, YouTube was new, a little bit unknown. Everybody was wielding it differently. So I remember rolling my eyes, although it was frustrating. You know what I mean? It was frustrating to put kind of effort and time, etc., into something like that. And then just have, trolls or, what I would argue was the seeds of what we've seen grow into like a redwood tree now on the left, which is just, rather than engage in the idea, you just shut down the messenger. So you hate the message, shut down the messenger. That is just 101, college freshman leftist course now. I mean, that is just the way they operate. If it's a speaker on campus, if it's an author, if it's a business owner, the left will just shut you down. I mean, it is so blatant and terrifying at this point. It somewhat does amaze me at the willingness to just turn a blind eye to it, as if that kind of ridiculousness can't turn around and bite you like a wild animal at any point. Nonetheless, now it is much more nefarious, ladies and gentlemen, and what YouTube is doing is demonetizing, ruining channels, purposefully policing messaging. So the big topics that you cannot talk about on YouTube is Islam. They will demonetize your channel if you talk about Islam, and they will demonetize your channel if you talk about anything in regards to race that is not politically correct. Now, there's other things too. There's the whole host, the stable of social engineering ideas and social engineering opinions, all of which, literally, I'm telling you this can be fact-checked. And by the way, I'm always encouraging you to fact-check these things I'm telling you. Fact-check them. I know so little people have any appetite to do that anymore. I would encourage you to fact-check what I'm telling you. YouTube is shutting down channels, shutting down specific videos, and 9 out of 10 of them are conservative messaging. Are messaging that leftists don't like, leftists deem unacceptable. Political correct elitism has established that the rabble and the peasants and the bourgeoisie should not speak of such things. The tenor and the tone and the whole host of sort of Orwellian terms that we now throw about. It's just unbelievable, and it's frightening. And although there are literally hundreds of examples that I personally know of, the thing that I think has been most shocking to me is there has been a channel called Pragertopia, and then he turned it into Prager University. Well, Prager University are these 5-minute informative videos that espouse a worldview. These are the least inflammatory things possibly on the internet. I mean, talk about benign by way of rhetoric and presentation, the most tempered things you can imagine. And again, vet that, fact check that. These are just clear deliveries of ideas. delivered by a host of people, some of the brightest minds in our generation. It's an unbelievable thing. It's just been phenomenally successful. And when I say successful, what I mean by this is millions, vet this again, millions of views per day, some days per hour. That's how successful it's been. And there's only been a couple years of existence for this. These videos, and all I can tell you to do is just watch one of them, are being shut down by YouTube. Shut down by YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a silencing of opinion. It is a silencing of, because I reiterate this all the time. I constantly pound this drum because it is so important to understand this. Leftism does not work when the opposition gets to deliver a clear message. It does not work. That's why universities operate the way they do. That's why these main alphabet soup channels operate the way they do. That's the way professors are the way they are. Leftism has to be incubator. It has to be, or it fails. And I'm always asking my leftist Americans, test it. Test it. Why are the greatest hyperbolic, what I would consider to be flamethrowers on the left? And right off the top of my head, what do we got here? We got Al Gore. Why do you think these guys are not exchanging ideas? Instead, what are they doing? They're villainizing. They're name-calling. They're trying to delegitimize the person. There's a reason for that, ladies and gentlemen. There's a reason for that. Anyway, it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying that this is going on. And this happening in what I deem as our only hope moving forward, which is the alternative way of getting news, which is the alternative way of delivering news. YouTube could have been, and still could be, I suppose, one of the greatest gifts to human beings. And I mean, all you had to do in your life is buy some weird product from Korea or China, and there is a YouTube video explaining, within seconds you can find a YouTube video, and this can be the most obscure plastic product you've ever bought. There's a YouTube video explaining how you get into that weird plastic that keeps you from the product. Then there's a YouTube video explaining how to use the product. It's unbelievable. If not for that YouTube video, you would be left with Korean instructions. Ladies and gentlemen, it literally, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, let alone information and global communication, etc. But leftism is always the arsenic in the vein of democracy, in the vein of free people exchanging ideas, sees it as a threat. And they control this stuff. Leftists control this stuff. They control information. They control culture. Their avenue has been to shut it down. Startling in its chutzpah, and startling in its consequences. I'm going to move on to another topic, but I just want you to understand and contextualize this. When I say leftism needs to be defeated, when I fight against it, when you hear me speak against it, I want to be very, very clear. It's not just because of this unique policy or that unique policy or this annoying action. It's because fundamentally, as an ideology, leftism is literally poison. And I've seen it. The consequences on individual personhood, the consequences on macro civilization, governance, cultures. It is poison. And it needs to be warred against. It needs to be defeated. And the way it shapeshifts and presents itself is so deceptive. But this, ladies and gentlemen, is what they actually do. This is what they do to people. This is how they act. And when you hear them project constantly, they're generally guilty of doing the things they're projecting. Anyway, we're moving on. That is one spoke in the wheel of this, fork in the road podcast that we have here. I'm wandering down a different road now, but similar in its ridiculousness and similar in its intention. So many of you might realize that an investigative journalist exposed Planned Parenthood in what I would clearly classify unequivocally as one of the most grotesque, hideous, and evil things I've seen exposed in my lifetime in the United States of America. So what we realized is taxpayer-funded Planned Parenthood was trafficking in human baby parts for profit. Do not allow any spin, deception, deflection to remove the sting from the tail of that truth I just told you. That is what they were caught doing, and that is a fact. Now the reaction, in like some sort of beehive-like coordinated effort, was to delegitimize which is always the case, right? Delegitimize the person making the claim, delegitimize the videos. How did they say that? They said they were edited. But of course, I vetted that the day that claim was made, and I realized entire uncut footage was hosted at the website. I think it's like, I don't know, the Committee for Ethical Medical Treatment, or I really don't remember the exact organization. I just can't remember that right off the top of my head. That was the claim, though, that this was selectively edited. And then as that lie and that deception and that misinformation campaign morphed, it became, this footage was gathered in illegal fashion, which washes us up on the shore of what I want to tell you today. Now, California levels 15 criminal charges against the filmmaker for illegally filming in places that he filmed. Right off the top of my head, let me ask this audience a very simple and pointed question as to cut through the noise. Do you think if the filmmaker had exposed, say, skinheads in America, say white nationalism or the KKK, say everything went down exactly the same way, but the target was skinheads or white nationalists or the KKK, do you think there would be 15 cases of criminal accounts against this filmmaker? I think you know the answer. No, this is politically pointed. This is a message. No one dare unearth what the left does. What the left does with money that, by the way, you give them. And in this case, what the left does and what they did with your money is they attempted and did. Now they've been completely exposed. And by the way, this, of course, also a tip of the iceberg. When you look into Gosnell and the many copycat Gosnells that spread all across the fruited plains, gutting women like fish in third world back alley abortion clinics, murdering the unborn, and then Planned Parenthood trying to get cream off the top from the baby parts as they sell them in a sick, twisted, sadistic black market, and then the legislation protects them, and then the courts and the leftist thugs that pretend to be judges or lawyers or the like level 15 counts of criminal accusation against this filmmaker. Profound in its political hit job. Now, I just want to contextualize this as we're doused, drowning in a sea of nonsense regarding the Kremlin, the Russians, KGB. Ladies and gentlemen, this is directly out of the KGB playbook. Whoever exposes you, kill their whole family, mar them in financial ruin, so that nobody that follows them would ever think of pulling the veil off the hideous, ugly, evil face of this ideology that would do this. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, they murder, predominantly minorities, by the way, to the millions. In your lifetime, millions of souls have been murdered in these ridiculous little shop of horror, hack job places that we call mammogram delivery centers. Misinformation, lies, deception, nonstop, constantly. Then these conscienceless, soulless credence from the underworld try to sell the body parts that are harvested and cut apart like somebody's dissecting a chicken for dinner. And the criminal becomes the filmmaker who exposed it. Ladies and gentlemen, that is your world. That is leftism. And that should motivate you to fight.
Democrats will regret the power grab